Hi, everyone. My name is Gretchen Myron. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a director in the Office of Inclusion at the NCAA. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar about triathlon. You're in the right place if you want to learn more about this amazing sport. I'm here with one of my colleagues, Dr. Ash, who will introduce herself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Ashlesha Lokhande. I serve as the Assistant Director of Education and Opportunity and work with Gretchen on all things emerging sports. Welcome.
Thanks. So as we noted, today's session is focused on the emerging sport of triathlon, swim, bike, run, grow, lots of fun things that you can do. So we're going to start off today by sharing just a little bit of background about the program before we get into some of the sport specifics. The NCAA is focused on continuing to advance women's sports through expanding women's sport opportunities, which is a huge part of the emerging sports program, and also amplifying that there are these new programs and other opportunities available to help share these great stories, which ultimately leads to more attention and viewership of women's sports, which we have seen really pay off, especially in recent years with the boon that we are seeing from women's sports across the ecosystem. A little bit more about the emerging sports program in particular. We did have a webinar a couple weeks ago about the program where we go into more details about that. So if you missed that, recordings will be available in the future. But at a high level, the NCAA Emerging Sports for Women program was created in the early 1990s out of a recommendation from the Gender Equity Task Force. It was really important to the task force that they continue to look at strategies to try to close the participation gap between men and women in college athletics, and the emerging sports program was one mechanism to try to do that. So the purpose is really to grow new opportunities for women in college by offering more sports that schools can consider that would continue to not only increase the profile that they have on those campuses, but increase the number of varsity teams they have and additional roster spots that could be available to female student athletes. Within the NCAA governance system, we do have a committee, the Committee on Access, Opportunity, and Impact, that oversees the program. It is an association-wide committee, which means that we have representatives from all three divisions who help serve and provide feedback on emerging sports, their progress, and their growth, in addition to lots of other duties that the committee has. Since its inception, 8 different sports have transitioned from emerging sport to championship status. And hopefully we'll talk about some others that we see on the horizon here with our current sports transitioning to soon too. So currently in the program, we do have 4 different sports: equestrian, flag football, rugby, and triathlon, which you're all here to learn more about today. One exciting thing about all of these sports is that they are also Olympic sports. So all of these have a great connection, post-collegiate or even to current student athletes too, of opportunities to compete on that international stage with the Olympics. And certainly we've seen some great ties to that for these sports and for others in the past, which has been really nice to see. So as far as what happens for emerging sports when they enter the system, we just want to share briefly kind of what this looks like, and then as it relates to triathlon as well. So as you'll see on the screen, this is a visual representation of how a sport transitions through the program. All of the sports do have to apply, and that application is reviewed and considered by the CAOI. If CAOI recommends the sport move forward, then it's up to each division to add that sport to the emerging sport for women list. And then the number that everyone is looking for to move to that next step is 40. So in number 4 there, you see the sport sponsorship requirement. It is required that any emerging sport has at least 40 varsity programs meeting minimum contest and participant requirements before they can move forward to be considered for NCAA championship status. And that's where we are with triathlon right now. You'll hear about numbers in a little bit here, but we're right on the cusp there of hopefully meeting that magic number of 40 to then move forward and be considered for an NCAA championship. So once that happens, it then goes through kind of a similar process of a legislative recommendation. That would again come from the CAOI after reviewing the sport and the program. Budget approval would also be required. And then it would go back to all 3 divisions to introduce and vote on legislation to establish a new NCAA championship. From about steps 5 through 8, that typically can be around 18 months to 2 years, just to move through all those different steps in that process. Okay, last couple of things for me before we get into more details about the sport itself. As part of the Emerging Sports program at the NCAA, we work with what we call sport leaders who are not only great advocates for their sport, but also are kind of the primary liaisons to the Emerging Sports program and to the committee. These are really wonderful advocates who know a ton about the sport, but also are very entrenched in trying to help it grow at the collegiate level. So their role is really to help assist in participation and varsity program growth. They're talking to schools and conferences often to share more about their sport, provide resources. Many help with scheduling and other concerns. They're really here to make your life easier on campus in trying to add a sport and having the information that you need to feel comfortable with that. A few other things that these sport leaders do that can be very beneficial is that they also help put on the championships before they reach NCAA championship status. So you'll learn a little bit more about that today. They also oversee playing rules and can help with coaching and officiating developments and fulfilling those pipelines there. Another big portion that several of these sport leaders help with is kind of the budgeting and financial side, including any grant opportunities that might be available. Supporting triathlon on your campus is going to be similar for any emerging sport that we talk about, but a few that we want to touch on here in particular that I think can be helpful is really thinking about, how this looks compared to other varsity sports. So something that's really important that we'll mention in all of these conversations is making sure that you're following NCAA rules, regulations, and eligibility requirements. It's actually very helpful to us as staff and also to the sport leaders if you have questions that you submit those through the appropriate venues with RISRO, that you're submitting your sport sponsorship information accurately. That's a huge one that's really beneficial to us. And also that you're looking at those minimum contest and participant requirements. All of those things help the sport, not only on your campus, but help the overall growth of it within the NCAA structure. As I mentioned, treating a triathlon like any other varsity sport on your campus is something that we will certainly mention for all emerging sports. So think about that experience as it compares to other sports and making sure that those student athletes feel just as supported, whether that's from their coaches and trainers, support staff, what their facilities look like and what they have access to. When you're adding a sport, it's not just adding it to maybe have some extra, to have additional student athletes on your campus, but really because you want to make it sustainable and have a really strong program going forward as well. Engagement with sport leaders is another helpful way to continue to support the sport's growth. So you'll hear again in a little bit from our triathlon sport leader. These are great resources for you. And so they really love to hear from member schools and conferences about what else they can do to help. And that continued engagement helps not only the sport leader, but also helps the sport overall as well. And then a few other things that we will mention, certainly from an NCAA perspective. We love to tell stories about these emerging sports student athletes. And so please continue to highlight them in your communications or in other ways. You've hopefully seen on ncaa.org that we've been able to share and repurpose many of the different student athlete stories from others. And you're encouraged and supported in doing that for emerging sports student athletes as well. And then updating information on your website is also very important and helpful to us, especially as triathlon is we're getting really close to that 40 number. We do verify any data related to sport sponsorship. And so having accurate information about your schedule and your competitions makes that review process a lot easier and will just help kind of smooth that out as triathlon gets close to 40. So with that, I think we are ready to turn it over to our fearless sport leader. I'm going to bring Ash back on screen to introduce Tim, and then he'll be off to the races. Thanks, Ash.
Gretchen. Hi, Tim. We're ready to start off with Tim, who is going to provide us with some information from the national governing body perspective. So Tim, take it over.
Hey, everybody. So great to see you here on this webinar. Triathlon, a very unique and interesting sport, which you'll hopefully be able to take some of the thing that we cover and share with your administrative staffs. USA Triathlon, governing body for the sport, which means that we govern everything from youth development through the formation of Olympic teams. NCAA obviously falls under our purview as well. And so it's really important that you understand we are here for the long haul, doing everything we can to support the sport at the NCAA level. Season of competition is fall. So the fortunate thing is we get to start September 1st or thereabouts September 1st. Last competition day is October 31st. We have our national championship any of 3 weekends in November. The sports sponsorship data, which Gretchen mentioned at 40, breaks down fairly evenly between divisions 17, 12, and 11. We continue to move those numbers as we talk to more and more administrators over time and try to create as much balance there as we can. Our sports sponsorship requirements is really 4 contests, which we believe is a huge perk for us because it means you're getting to race about every other weekend during the competition season. A lot of times it can be during the weekend. It could be a late day event as well. A lot of things we'll get into in a second about what the event structure looks like. For us, sports sponsorship is having 3 participants between 2 NCAA varsity women's institutions to actually meet the sports sponsorship requirement. Average roster size, again, the average goal number is again 10 to 12 student athletes. As it's noted here in the asterisk, our D1 roster cap is 14. When you're looking at numbers, it really is a goal number to try to get to that 12 to 15. I'll say that Joe, who's on the call on the panel today, has exceeded that, and we have other institutions that are also above that number. What that will do is obviously support the needs that you have, maybe in having greater participation on your college campus rostered in the sport of triathlon. Our recruiting databases, we're really fortunate too, and it's just not about a triathlon population. Sure, we have a pretty good cross-section of triathletes between high-performance teams at the junior level to advocates and athletes that are competing in small local, regional, state events, to people that are venturing down the sport at the youth levels. One of the things that we pride ourselves on is we are able to pull from a lot of different sources. The one that you'll see on this slide is maybe surprising, and that is soccer. Soccer is our number 4 sport that we are able to find athletes from, probably because they do a lot of running. International recruitment is also very big. We have 183 countries that are part of what we call World Triathlon. We have 30 of those countries represented on our current rosters, which accumulates a lot of participation roster size needs, which was nice. 250,000 triathletes is what we consider that triathlon population at the international level. Single sport athletes, combines, clinics, camps, and all locations with current programs. We're able to identify single sport athletes through a lot of different avenues. These are athletes that are typically competing at the high school levels, maybe in a single sport. It may be a dual sport as well. We'll get into some of the combinations that we actually find when we get to the Q&A section of today's presentation. The competition format, and this is where there's some flexibility as well. We've worked closely with Ash, Gretchen, and the team on identifying the different variations of competition formats that we do have. We have sprint, which is our standard format. It is a 750-meter swim, which is about a 12-minute swim. It's a 20K bike, which is about a 35-minute bike. And it is a 5K run, which is a 21, 22-minute run for some of the mid-range athletes. We have the ability to be super sprint distance as well, which is half of the sprint distance. And it can even be shorter than super sprint as well, depending on the location and the footprint that you're actually doing the event on. Combination of outdoor and indoor. This is where we're also fortunate that, yes, we might have an institution that does an indoor swim, then they do a run outdoors, which is what we call an aquathlon or a swim run event. So it would be a combination of outdoor, indoor. And then we have the ability to do all indoor as well, where you might have a pool, and then you move to trainers on the bike or spin bikes, or you may do treadmill work as well in the indoor facility that you're actually doing this at. We also have duals, triangulars, and quads. And so there's the ability to do a dual with an institution that's close to you. We can have triangulars where you have 2 or 3 institutions that come and do multiple events in a particular day. And then we have quads, which sometimes is a little easier to bring together. That's usually in an open body of water, but it can also be an indoor event as well, depending on how many athletes they would actually bring. The championship structure currently have our regional championships that are east and west. We have an A wave and a B wave. So every athlete on every roster hopefully will be able to compete in these. We do have a participation limit of 10, but for many institutions, if you have 10, you get to bring all 10 of your athletes to actually compete in that particular event. We have 3 waves of athletes that are national championship. Again, this is considered A, B, and C, and we have a regional qualification that's done for that, so we can actually position student athletes in those ways based on time, and then a combination of rankings that come into play as well to determine athletes are going to meet qualification for nationals and those that will be positioned within those respective ways. We've moved from a team and individual qualification to an individual qualification only, mainly because it was allowing and opening the door for individuals that were maybe on smaller squad sizes to still get in with even an average performance, giving them the opportunity to be part of the zenith. A national championship event is pretty spectacular. So we've shifted from that team to individual qualification. At the events, the regional championships and our national championships, we still honor and recognize the top individuals and teams. And we are able to do that because of an open-mindedness about how important the team element is to an individual sport. Bike and run are multiple laps. One of the things that we've really done is look at the competitive footprint. If you do an indoor swim, then you're probably doing multiple laps on that indoor pool. If you're doing a bike outdoors, you can do 2 or 3 laps on a bike to allow you to use the same footprint, a much smaller footprint on a college campus. And then a run could be on a track, it could be on trails, it could also be on that college campus as well. The idea is to not become too complex and overcomplicated in what you're trying to do in establishing events on your college campus. Facilities and equipment. The pool really is the main place where athletes are going to be training. 68% of the institutions have their own pool that they use on their campus. 32% are using a community or a high school pool or an area pool. This is a surprising number when we have a lot of conversations with athletic directors. Most think that they have to have a pool in order to do the event. We know, obviously, through the statistic that you do not. Any distance will work yards or meters. Swimming can also be done in a lake. And when you might use a lake in that vicinity of your institution, it might be where you have bought a fleet of wetsuits and you're having the student athletes work on position around the neck and the arms and the ankles and other locations. It might also be done where you have buoys out in the water where they're actually working on sighting the buoys and getting some practice in there. Biking is mainly indoors, but if you have inclement weather, the perfect time to do an indoor bike workout is in a spin room when it's blowing, raining, hailing, or whatever might be going outdoors. That doesn't happen often, but it is an option for student athletes to do. And then running as well as cycling, most of it is done outdoors. You can find trails and paths and other roads to do a lot of training on. If you want to use a track for speed work, that door is open for that to actually happen. Onboarding process. And one of the things that we created was an actual onboarding document, which is a document that can walk through anything from 3 months to 3 years out, so that you know exactly what the movement of and pace of things should be for you to add the sport over the longer term. And we will present that to any institution decision maker at any point in time. We have job descriptions that we offer as part of the coach hire process. We have town halls that we do with coaches and the administration, which is a great educational opportunity to talk about what the institution is doing to support the sport, what it's going to be doing within the community. And then we get to talk a little bit about what it often is to those coaches in case they're not aware of that as well. We also have an NCAA coaching education curriculum, which was built specifically by the NCAA coaches for new coaches that wanted to learn about the sport as they were breaking down the walls of what it is they need to know to be excellent coaches. Mentorship programs. We have our coaches also serving as mentors. These can be group or individual one-on-one mentors that they actually are able to bring in and learn a little bit about the nuances of the sport. Host combines, camps, education seminars. We're doing these again to educate individuals on what the institution is doing around the sport, so we will actually help the institution do that. Provide sample budgets and build customized net revenue tables. Again, another thing that's really important is we want you to have all the data you need. So you know exactly what it's going to cost. You know exactly based on what we run down for cost of attendance, where the numbers are going to fall if you were to add the sport with as large or as small of a roster count as you want to include as part of that. Assist with competition schedules. We're really fortunate too that we don't get too complicated with the scheduling. We talked about duals, triangulars, and quads. We have triathlon cups as well. We have our regionals, our nationals. And so it's not a big, overwhelming list of event options, which is good because you get to do some things close to home. You get to do some things that are actually getting you out on the road a little bit. Extensive recruitment support. This is one of the things that we believe we should have a big hand in doing. We've created plans that include 100-mile radius recruitment. We have local recruitment opportunities. We have other things we've done through video, or other coaches have done demonstrations to how they recruit. Really important for us to be part of the recruitment discussions that are actually had out there. View ourselves as partners. That's one of the things that we're going to do, is we're going to be not doing a handoff and say, good luck. Check in when you want. We're going to say, wherever and whenever you need help from us, we're going to be there walking hand in hand, side by side with you the entire way. General budgetary considerations. Again, these are operational costs. It excludes salaries and benefits, and it may include other things that fall within the cost structure of the institution. This is where we will actually work with the athletic director to come up with what that budget should look like for the institution if they're adding the sport. The averages, based on surveys and research that we've done, is 55 to 99,000 for Division I, 43,000 for Division II, and 38,000 for Division III. This isn't to say this is a cap. If you want to be a lot more competitive in the sport, you're probably going to have a bigger budget. If you want to be less competitive in the sport, but you still want to have it, and you still want to have it impact the institution, you may fall within these thresholds that we're talking about here. What we do offer are grants, and these grants will come as seed grants. We're at $4.1 million that we've given to institutions since 2014. And we also have continuation grants, which is a grant that may arise because of a cost factor. Like this past year, we had an institution come back to us saying it's a lot more expensive to get to this venue than we thought. Can you help us with $2,000 continuation grant, which we were able to do for them. We also have vendors, a very big vendor supply list. As a governing body, we have a relationship with a lot of companies that can help you offset costs as part of that budgeting as well. And we will put you in touch with the institutions, the vendors, and other groups that come along that want to be part of the support system for each of you.
All right. Tim, thank you for your perspective, and thank you for all that information. I'm sure there are some questions for you later on, but I asked the panelists to come on so we can get this started. We are joined today by three incredible athletic administrators who will join Tim and me in a panel discussion shortly. These administrators, in their own roles and in their own ways, have amplified triathlon on their campus and athletic departments. They will also share their experiences, the impact of sponsoring triathlon on their campus, and also share some challenges and lessons they have learned along the way. So I ask each of them to come on and introduce themselves. We'll start with Cody.
Hi, everyone. Cody Hendrickson, University of Arizona, Assistant Athletic Director for Strategy and Innovation, but also serve as our triathlon sport administrator here.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Stephanie Stevens, and I'm the head women's basketball coach, the senior woman administrator, and athletics Title IX coordinator at Gallaudet University, which is D3, and I'm going into my 14th year here.
And Joe?
Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Reich. I'm the Vice President for Athletics at Wingate University. I've been at Wingate for 26 years, so I've been here a long time. But the last 3 or 4 as the athletic director. Before that, my former life, I was a football coach. So,
Thank you for joining us. And I know we heard from Tim. So my actual first question is for Joe. Joe, can you talk about what initially attracted your institution to triathlon, and how did your decision-making process unfold on campus?
sure. So when I was on staff at that point, I was not at the AD, but I was involved in all that. So, and I've obviously got caught up to speed when I was the AD. So when we first looked at triathlon, I think like a lot of schools, we were looking primarily at, how can we increase the number of women's sports and the number of slots for women overall. So that was the big driver, just in terms of, we knew from a Title IX perspective, we have 200 football players, the whole thing. So just trying to make up those numbers a little bit. We were attracted to triathlon first in that way. And then also from a enrollment revenue, tuition revenue standpoint, it was like, okay, mid-size roster for us. That's what we consider more mid-size roster. So it's not the smallest group, but because we also brought along a men's club team with that. So we weren't just looking at the women's part of it. We were looking, okay, let's add men's as a club. So we were able to get a little bit of the benefit of a mid-size roster, but yet be able to focus on the NCAA competitiveness of having a smaller roster with the women. So it was mainly those two things that led us down that path.
Stephanie, I know you hold quite a few roles at your institution. So can you talk about how does triathlon align with your institution's strategic priorities, including student athlete enrollment, opportunities, but also campus culture?
Sure, thank you. We are going into our third year with triathlon, and our head coach has been extremely grateful within our athletics department and administrators in terms of him feeling trusted, trusted with making and creating new experiences for these student athletes and our department and university. But it's allowed all of us to learn how to lead more intentionally. And that's understanding that the sport is about removing barriers. And especially, here at Gallaudet, we are removing those language barriers. We are educating, and we are also creating, meaningful pathways for these student athletes. And triathlon allows us to expand interest and participation for women and reach student athletes who may not have been supported or have been thinking about going to the university if it weren't for triathlon. And we have been extremely grateful for being able to mentor our assistant coaches as well as our student athletes. And that's just been a huge step going into our third year, knowing that the last 2 years we've had student athletes who have now graduated and they are familiar with the sport. Well, now they are becoming these assistant coaches and helping us build momentum for our current and future student athletes.
That. Cody, let's talk about Arizona for a second. Y'all won 2 national championships in triathlon. So what are some key factors that contributed to a sustainable and successful triathlon program from your perspective?
Yeah, so similar to Stephanie, we're entering year 4 here at the University of Arizona for triathlon, and really it starts with the people. It starts with the leadership at top with Coach Johnson, but also the assistant coaches, our strength staff, our athletic trainers. Everybody's built into what Coach Johnson has built and what he continues to recruit, and intentional recruiting of student athletes who fit the culture, who fit the mold, who want to be a part of the University of Arizona as a whole, not just a part of the triathlon team. And it's really been a part of integrating them into campus, integrating them into student athlete life, and really focusing on the holistic development of student athletes. They're one of our most successful academically on campus. They're super, super intentional. They're all pursuing crazy degrees that are above my level of expertise with medicine and engineering and actuarial sciences, everything of that sort. So they're just a really successful group, but it starts with our people and the investment. And then as far as sustainability, I think I've kind of talked about it, but it's about building that infrastructure that allows for sustainability. Sure, we appreciate the national championships and raising the trophy, but to see the young women grow year after year and become more confident, become more ingrained in campus, become more involved with our student athlete advisory committee, and just really be involved in the athletic department and campus community as a whole has been a large part to sustaining that, because they are feeling a part of campus, they are feeling a part of Arizona athletics, and they're making the most of their experience. So between the sustainability and that, and then lastly, I think it's just the institutional support. Anytime you have alignment from the president to the athletic director to all of our administrators and support staff down, that are supporting them, that are helping them reach their goals, and supporting triathlon on not even just a U.S. level, but at international level, as we have a number of ladies that are competing across the world this summer, and highlighting their stories, like we talked about earlier, is showing showing them succeeding at a high level and telling those stories at a high level. So I think it's a mixture of those things, and then just the culture of championship expectations and wanting to be the best every day. And Coach Johnson does a great job of recruiting girls, young women who want to be a part of this program and succeed beyond their time as a triathlete, but in their professional career as well.
In today's landscape of college athletics, athletic departments are finding creative ways to support their and fund their programs. So my first question is for you, Joe. Can you give an insight on the institution's process on funding and staffing the program during its inaugural years? And what resources and campus partnerships were critical during that program's launch phase?
Sure, absolutely. First of all, let me say this. Tim did a great job and is a great advocate for USA Triathlon. So if you're interested in, if you feel like as an athletic director or administrator, whoever's on the call here, I would get a hold of Tim because he's fantastic in the support, and just he is the number one driver of a lot of this triathlon stuff across the country. He's fantastic. So I would say get a hold of Tim, number one. Number two, when we were looking at the financial part of it, it's still even today. I mean, that's a big part of it. At a school like ours, I'm not going to let Cody steal all our thunder with being national champ. We won the national champ 2 years ago in Division II, so I have to say that. And our men won the club national championship 2 years in a row. But I'm not saying anything there. I'm just bringing it, just bringing the heat. But from that standpoint, from a financial standpoint, we looked at it. We did the norm. A lot of y'all do. We did the pro formas. We looked at it. We broke down every cost, every enrollment revenue cent that we could kind of look at to determine, where we could gain the most cost. But we talked to Tim. We got different grants to start it, and that was a great thing for us. I mean, we needed that extra money at school, a small school like ours. We needed every cent we could get there. So when we did the research, we sat with our CFO, sat with our business office. Let's go through this in detail, know where every cent's coming from, know where every cent's going. We couldn't afford to make a mistake there. And fortunately, our people did a great job with that. So we knew what we were getting into. I will say, when we first started the model, we had a head coach. Our head coach's name is Nick Rakowicz, and he's fantastic. He was Olympian, USA Olympian. He's just off the charts great with what he does. So we were able to fund him and an assistant coach at that time. Now we have a head coach and a GA instead. So we don't have the assistant coach. We just had the GA. That was just a decision the school made at one point when the assistant left, to kind of come back and say, again, it depends on in that mold, what we were paying that assistant. It wasn't great. It wasn't great. So I think we felt like we could get more out of a graduate assistant at that point. So that's been a good combination. Again, if you're an enrollment-driven school, Nick is a great recruiter, but it's nice to have a second person there that can recruit. We spread ours out between international and domestic, so we're about half and half, maybe a little bit more international right now, but I think you'll see us go a little bit more domestic over the next few years. So there's a level there to get the numbers that we need to get. We have about 19 on both sides. So we're somewhere between 36 and 40 total student athletes. So to get there, you need a little bit of help. You don't want one guy recruiting all that, one man or woman recruiting all that. So it's nice to have the GA to kind of help out with that. But all those were financial considerations that we went through and we're still going through today. I mean, that we look at it every year and what's our baseline roster number and what can we do with this amount of money, and facilities and things like that. That's a whole nother, we'll answer that later on. But what are the things that are necessary from a financial startup point that you're going to have to pay for, that you need when you first come on. We just want to make sure we had all that in tow, kind of thing. So
I agree on reach out to Tim. He's the best. So
he's awesome. Tim's awesome.
That. Yes.
Now don't get the big head there, Tim, but you're awesome, dude.
Stephanie, this next question is for you. For your triathlon program, how did your athletic department secure leadership support from the president and other key stakeholders to launch this program and be successful?
Yes, first and foremost, it was the grant opportunity that was available to us. We were, fortunate enough to have a deaf Olympian head coach, Brian Bennett, who is just done a great job with our swimming program, but he is able to transition to our triathlon squad. And, his office is right in the pool. And there are so many, opportunities for that aspect in terms of the facilities, which is so important. We have a pool, we have that access, and we have for a D3 school, we have a cyclist club, and we were able to kind of bring in and borrow, some equipment and tools the first year as we were purchasing new equipment and everything and tools for our student athletes. And the leadership, it was pretty easy, with the grant that we were able to convince our president and advancement leadership to let's try this, let's do this opportunity, because it had, it shows how we are able to support enrollment. Again, for those student athletes who may not have been coming to Gallaudet at all, now have this opportunity. The gender equity, there's, even if we do have right now our female student athletes, there's still not enough, and we're trying to boost that. And then just having a different kind of student athlete engagement, because the endurance sports, sometimes we don't always have events here on campus, like home events. So having the pool access, and we are able to host an event this year, will just open so many doors and opportunities for our athletics department and university. So we're lucky too that our head coach has been reaching out to external partners and coaches and just trying to learn, because we all have to be open to learning more. It's a new sport, and for many of us, administrators, coaches, fans, and we're just building upon that. And working within internal partnerships, it just allows the leadership to support this new sport, such as triathlon, and just kind of see how we are advancing our university long term.
Thank you for that. And I should have asked this, can you give a quick background of your institution and who it primarily serves?
Yes, absolutely. So Gallaudet University, which is located in Washington, D.C., we are the only liberal arts university in the world for the deaf and hard of hearing. So yes, we can bring in hearing or CODAs, which is a child of a deaf adult. We can bring those student athletes in as well, but it's more focused on accessibility, language, opportunity. And I am proud to say that I'm now fluent in American Sign Language, and sometimes use my hands a lot. So right now I have my hands in my pockets, making sure that I'm not doing it as much, but that's who we serve, and very fortunate to be at this university for so long.
Cody, my next question is for you. How have partnerships with USA Triathlon and other stakeholders supported your program's development?
The partnerships are incredibly important, and really what I appreciate about the relationship with USA Triathlon is that us as campuses, we don't have to feel like we're fighting that fight alone. Like, we are fighting it all together, and trying to continue to advance the sport, advance the mission, create opportunities for women in sports. And Tim has done a great job with that, and USA Triathlon's done a great job with that in supporting and trying to build. And that's the partnership that I appreciate most, is that we don't feel alone or on an island. We're doing this all together. And then the partnerships on campus also help that. Like Stephanie said, we hosted a home triathlon event last year on campus. And that was a big undertaking, but we had campus partners that were willing to help. Were willing to help map things out, campus PD, parking, like all of those things, to where it made it a great event for our student athletes. And so much so that our campus partners want to do it again. And we're jumping at the bit of what data are we looking at? How can we help, and how can we do that? And as we work to finalize things, it's fun to know and supporting to know that our campus is involved in that. We're also, uniquely situated to where we have a great triathlon community here in Tucson and around. So we have local organizations, we have um, community members who are very involved in the triathlon community that get involved and want to find ways to support. And some of those people have become like second families to our triathletes because they're there to support. They're a sounding board, and they're available to help whenever anything is needed. So those partnerships are key. They're huge for us as we continue to build, continue to grow, not just internally here at the University of Arizona, but the sport of triathlon nationally. And we've had some good exposure with that and look forward to continuing to grow that support.
Tim, I know everyone has great things to say about you, so I'm going to bring you into the conversation now. What opportunities exist for institutions that are exploring triathlon but have not made that decision yet? And are there questions campus leaders should be asking themselves if they were to evaluate and try to add triathlon as a future sport on their campus?
Well, thank you, Ash. And just know that grants are going to these three individuals on this call in support of their support of me. So just know that there's some funding that supports the kind words that they're saying. It actually all starts with the institution's athletic administrators asking the things they ask around every assessment opportunity that they're looking at. Does the sport achieve enrollment objectives? Does it create support for Title IX? Can this sport attract high achieving student athletes? Does it leverage facilities we already have or have access to? Can it strengthen the institution brand and bring excitement to the institution? I think those are things that get to be answered first and foremost before a call even is made to me. When it does happen, the first thing that I would like to do is to say, let's walk through a deck. It's a 14-minute and 33-second overview of really what the sport is all about. It talks about everything from our format to coaches and their salaries and the cost of operational expenses. And it really is a good resource. We've been told by many that it's a really good starting place for many of them to first learn about what our sport is about. Taking a look at the net revenue table and assessing that internally to say, is it going to meet the revenue needs that we have per what we already said? One thing we do know is that in every situation, I've done net revenue tables for probably 150 institutions, that there's not been one situation where the institution did not land in the black in year one, which is a really good sign that the sport is affordable. I think it's also important to say who in the administrative support arena are going to be able to support the sport if we do bring it on. I think that's an important question. The other thing that will happen, and it happened this year with one of our new institutions, is this a sport that we can leverage to grow another aspect of our portfolio? This institution wanted to grow its swim roster size. And so by adding triathlon, the coach was brought in to lead both of these sports. And he is going to grow the size of the swimming roster as well as grow triathlon at the same time. So asking a question, is there a joint opportunity to be able to grow another sport that might be in need that is a sister sport of ours? And then other questions such as the community of triathlon, and Cody mentioned this, that Tucson is an amazing location for the sport. Is community of triathlon, does it make sense for us to add this sport for the community's perspective? Is there a built-in culture on the college campus of endurance sports? Is this a run, swim, bike, outdoor fitness type of location? Where does it impact our internal administration and sports science teams, and answering that question as part of the assessment? How about looking at institutions that already have great and strong cross-country track and swim programs and successes they have there? Does it make sense? We have one of our D3s that was a cross-country powerhouse who's now won 4 national titles in triathlon because they consider themselves an endurance institution. And finally, don't be afraid of what you don't know. And so asking the questions that, as simple as they might be when we're having those conversations, and embracing what it is that can be done to bring on what we call a very fundamentally based Olympic sport into the actual portfolio. If you do not have answers to your questions as part of our discussion, even in that first discussion, I've completely failed on the mission to deliver on that. So a lot of things that can happen before that first call is made, and a lot of things that can happen as part of that first call as well.
Thank you for that. Stephanie and Joe, this one is for you, and we're going to focus on growth opportunities here. How do your recruiting strategies reflect the realities and priorities of your institutions and your division as well?
Stephanie, you want to start with that?
Sure, thank you. You know, the recruiting strategies, although they remain the same, we are able to expand the outlook and outreach in terms of what kind of student athlete we are trying to recruit. Most of our deaf schools, they're so small, they may not even have a swimming team. They may not even have a cross country team. And it's not necessarily consistent throughout, the nation, but there are so many student athletes out there that have always enjoyed running, and they also enjoy swimming. So now we are getting a different kind of student athlete interested in, coming to Gallaudet to actually play a collegiate sport. And that's, so exciting. Um, and at the D3 level too, the recruiting here is so much more than, the athletic ability. To be honest, there are some of our student athletes who had never participated on, a team before because they didn't have it at their high school. But as again, they had always wanted to. And so this is, the best way to bring in more student athletes and allow our women to see that you may enjoy endurance sports, you may enjoy, just a different kind of athlete and experience, that this is where you can go. And the other part is a cultural awareness. For us, there's a deaf community, and not everybody who comes here as a deaf or hard of hearing person may understand what the deaf community is and finding their identity. But allowing triathlon, we've had profoundly deaf student athletes, and then we've had hard of hearing, and then we've actually had some hearing student athletes that have come through triathlon just within those, the last 2 years. And it's been tremendous in terms of the bond that they are able to create and sustain. And it allows for optimal personal growth, and that personal growth goes beyond eligibility years. We are helping them, in triathlon is allowing the high level opportunities and competitiveness to bring out the best in us, and we're so fortunate to be able to expand that recruiting pool.
I would say with us, it's kind of getting back to what Tim mentioned before. So the culture on the campus. So we've won 2 out of the last 3 national championships in cross country in Division II. So we already have kind of like Tim said, there's a culture here of distance sports, all that. Now we don't have anybody that crosses over, not one. Nobody in swimming, nobody. But we already have that general outlook on in our sports. And then from an athletic standpoint, again, we're about 50-50 international, domestic, maybe slightly more in internationals right now, but that's similar. Like on cross country, it's a heavy international, but we're starting to go back and recruit more domestics now. Swimming's the same way. It's been heavy international. We're trying to get a few more domestics. Tennis is the same way. Golf is the same way. So we have a very similar student athlete base on campus with certain sports that probably those on the call are very familiar with. When you're talking tennis, swimming, cross country, golf, all those sports tend to have a decent amount of international students on them. So already, so when they come here, there's, if you get international who comes in, it's they fit in. If they're domestic, they can, there's that culture on campus in terms of just the distance aspect of it, or the swimming aspect of it, or things like that. So it was a natural addition to our stable of sports. And it really, we were very fortunate in that it kind of fit right in a nice slot for us in terms of the overall recruiting, the overall recruiting for our university.
Before we go into the Q&As, my last question for each one of you is, could you share some best practices, 1 or 2 best practices for athletic administrators when it comes to supporting triathlon on their campus? And Cody, I can start with you.
Yeah, I'll start us off, and I will say, as somebody who grew up in the Midwest and is in the Southwest now, triathlon was not at the forefront of my mind and I didn't know a lot about the sport. And as I've been involved with it and come to see the community around it, the more that I understand the sport and the more that I can understand the needs that Coach Johnson has, that our student athletes have, the more that I can better support them or better advocate for what's coming for them. I've come to really enjoy triathlon. My first race was hosting a home race, which was eye-opening, which was fantastic. But then being able to see regionals in Fort Worth and nationals in Tempe and seeing how we can continue to grow the sport while also supporting our student athletes on campus and advocate for what they need has been really eye-opening for me and has helped me understand. And it's helped me understand how we can continue to elevate the student athlete experience because not everything requires more resources. Maybe it's better coordination. Maybe it's a better understanding of what is needed to elevate their experience. And that's been really helpful for me. So I'll leave that little nugget right there.
Tim, do you want to go next?
Yeah, and I'll just kind of throw these out there as bullet points. Number one, hire the right coach. And the individuals on this call have all mentioned their coach being a key catalyst, being able to meet the goals of the institution. Establish realistic roster growth goals, I think, is also a best practice recommendation. Appropriate the right amount of funding support for it. Don't get too lean if you can support a slightly more aggressive budget. I know we're in really tight times now, but by giving the ability for roster size to also mean a slightly more aggressive budget can also help. Put the coaches that you bring on board in touch with the best recruiters on campus so they can share their best practices. I think sometimes we forget in our own backyards that we have great people who know how to recruit and do things great. How about measure success by institutional impact, not just athletic success? I think sometimes we forget that national titles are won and people get a walk home with trophies, but it really is about what the institution's impact is by the student athletes on those college campuses. And finally, hopefully this isn't a negative, embrace your collaboration with us. We want to be equally invested in your goals and help you meet and exceed what it is you want to see triathlon do on your institution campus.
Joe and Stephanie, anything else to add there?
Stephanie?
Yes, sure. Thank you. So Tim, you did, kind of say what I was thinking about in terms of we need to integrate, triathlon and continue to integrate with those external teams. And we have to think in a bigger picture as one team. And it's easier said than done, but it's always good reminders, thinking that, athletic training or communications or academic support. I know Cody had mentioned that their team was higher in the GPA. And that those are the kind of student athletes that we are getting, with triathlon. So it's something to know that we've got to, the best practices in terms of, fully integrate why you're doing something and be able, as a Title IX coordinator, I've learned so much through the NCAA CAOI committee. And I've learned so much to kind of see through both lenses in terms of you're constantly building the emerging sport, but you're also helping build and sustain those other resources and those other programs that have been around for a long time. So, the constant thinking of, is this equitable? Are we supporting everybody? How their sport, their programs need to be. And that, it as SWA too, like you have to constantly think about that. And then as administrators, be okay with asking those questions and just asking for advice and reaching out. Our head coach has asked so many questions and it hasn't been, a bother, but it's wanting to know what he and his staff can do better to help build our program. And, constantly understanding that the big wins, they come with those small successes at the beginning. So when we are able to get the grant funding, or when you are able to reach out to those partnerships, to get anything to be helpful with equipment and resources, it's huge and it goes a long way. And just continue to invest in relationships. And, as Tim mentioned too, that collaboration is so important. It's one team mindset, and that's, what you should stick with.
Real
George,
simple points, two
Yeah.
simple points for us.
perfect. Yes.
A lot, maybe off the totally different vibe. Have a bike room, a room that they can ride the bike in when it's raining out, a room that, you can stick your bike in, you can ride your trainers, you can fix it, stuff like that. We got really fortunate in that we were looking for a bike room, something to house triathlon, and we ended up literally, there was a house on campus that was local that we owned that we couldn't rent for different reasons, and we now have the House of Tri. So like we put our whole team, like that's where the training is. They have that's where the offices are, but they have an indoor place where they can ride the bikes and they can store their bikes, which has been huge because at first we didn't have that. We got lucky, and that was the big complaint from our head coach. I need a bike room. I need a bike room. I need a bike room. So that'd be number one. And number two would be you're gonna have a number of student athletes running around the campus and on the roads around campus and riding around campus and on the roads on campus. So the more you can make your local community aware of that, fortunately, the mayor of Wingate is our soccer coach. So we do a lot of like public, hey, we're going to be on the roads. We're going to be here. We're going to be there. Like certain roads that we ride on when we host home meets, we're on the same roads and we put out signs. So, communicate with your local authorities and your local folks that your people are going to be out on the roads.
Thank you for that. I'm going to have Gretchen come on and close us out.
Thank you so much, everyone. That was a great conversation. Lots of really helpful takeaways and good little nuggets to listen to. So thanks so much again to Tim, to our panelists for joining us today. I think it was incredibly educational. We're only going to get to one question that we had in the Q&A, but it's an easy one and one that we can hopefully help answer as NCAA staff. And that was asking a little bit more about the timing for triathlon on when it could potentially become an NCAA championship. So as Tim noted in the sports sponsorship information, we're tracking on right around that 40 number for this fall. So we're hoping that 40 institutions do meet those minimum contest and participant requirements. And if they do, that would initiate kind of that transition process. Generally, we say that could be about 2 years from starting that to the actual championship. So if we're looking at meeting that number in fall of 2026, it's possible we could be looking at an NCAA championship in fall of 2028, which would be coming off of the LA 28 Olympics, where hopefully we'll have some triathlon student athletes competing for Team USA and others. So I know lots of fingers are crossed on this call that those numbers are met this fall to hopefully get us to there going forward. But we are at time, so I just want to again thank our panelists and Tim for joining us. We do have additional webinars coming up for the sports of rugby and equestrian, so please tune into those if you are interested. We will also send out some information later with a short survey about this call and its usefulness, so please feel free to fill that out if you're able and give us some feedback on what else you'd like to learn or what you were able to learn today. But just thank you again to everyone for joining and for your interest in the Emerging Sport program and for supporting these amazing student athletes. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.